welcome to Relish Books. So I should have made this video yesterday, but since I didn't, I'm making it today. This is what's supposed to be my Monday poetry highlight. I'm just gonna do it on Tuesday this week. So this week's author that I am talking about, I've mentioned several times, and that is Billy Collins. These are the collections of his that I own. I've read quite a few others though. I have 9 Horses, Horoscopes for the Dead, Sailing Alone Around the Room, The Rain in Portugal, and Aimless Love, which is a collection that has a bunch of sections from a bunch of his other books, and also some new ones, the way poetry collections often work, which can be frustrating sometimes if you're trying to read all of an author's work. Sometimes you think you get a new book and it's actually mostly stuff that's in other books, and the way that they're listed, it can be complicated to actually find the names of all their work for some reason with authors that are pretty prolific, at least. So Billy Collins, I enjoy his poetry. He is on the edge for me of a certain genre of poetry that I don't really like, but most of the time I like him. Part of that is a little bit of a bias. I had read a few of his poems before, but this one, 9 Horses, is the first collection of his poetry that I got, and it's probably my favorite. I feel like overall it just has the best poems, but there's a bias there because I found this. There was a little shelf that was a free library in the cafe that I was working at a few years ago, and I picked this up one day because I knew the name Billy Collins. I'd read some of his poetry, I thought I liked him, and I opened it, and it is actually a signed copy. Let's see. And it's signed to someone that has the same name as me. So it's as if it's signed to me, and the date on it is the year that I was born. So it was like my miracle book. I was so excited, and I really enjoyed it. Again, part of that was probably bias, but I feel like if I hadn't liked it, it would have just been extra disappointing. So I did really like it. This one I feel like just is very well-rounded. A lot of his others, I think Horoscopes for the Dead was pretty good, and Sailing Alone Around the Room is pretty good. The Rain in Portugal, if I'm remembering right, I didn't reread all of these for the video. The Rain in Portugal wasn't super great. I might be mixing a couple of them up, but yeah, and I've read quite a few others, and the ones that I have are some of the best. Some of those other collections, sometimes there will be a whole collection that's just kind of blah. And like I said at the beginning, he's one of the poets that's on the edge for me of a style that I don't like. He has, and not to say that his poetry can't still be complex, but he has the tone. He takes this very casual tone in most of his poetry. That's not to say that there's not necessarily structure, but he uses very everyday language about everyday scenes. And he really seems to subscribe in a lot of ways to the idea, which is sometimes an excellent, beautiful idea, and sometimes can be really abused and misused in the world of literature. The idea that writing about something lends it importance. The idea about taking hold of a moment and writing about it makes it an important thing. And if you do it well, it really can, because, all the little moments of life can definitely be beautiful and worthwhile to write about if you do it well. But poets especially have a tendency to act like they're really elevating these very normal things by writing about them. And sometimes they miss that if you're going to do that, you have to do it really, really well for it to work. And sometimes Billy Collins really hits the mark. Sometimes these very normal little scenes can be really poignant and funny. He's often humorous, but sometimes you're kind of reading, it's just kind of like, there's not really anything going on here. It's not a story, but it doesn't always feel like poetry. So sometimes he's not a bad poet, but sometimes he definitely falls into being mediocre. And then some of his later anthologies especially, he's not always super clean, just something to be aware of. Not anything really awful, but sometimes he uses, talks about some kind of questionable stuff, it uses some language, but for the most part he's pretty good about that, especially in his earlier collections. But yeah, he has some really great ones, some great gems. I really enjoy his poetry about poetry. And I like that even though I don't usually go for a super casual style, I like that he doesn't take himself too seriously. Because some poets will talk about like super ordinary stuff in very mediocre language and then act like it's the greatest thing in the world and they're just the greatest, most brilliant thing since sliced bread. And Billy Collins really doesn't do that. You can tell that he, considers himself a serious poet, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like he has a lot of humor, and it doesn't feel like he takes himself super seriously or has too inflated of an ego, which I really appreciate. So yeah, I've mentioned him a couple times before. I think too, sometimes I've made the mistake of because the largest collections of poetry that I have, after Mary Oliver, I have the most of her books, of course, but after her, I have the most Billy Collins, and sometimes I can make the mistake of kind of reading them too much alongside of each other, and they're really not to be compared. Sometimes I can make that mistake, and that makes Billy Collins look really bad. But you have to remember that he's his own. He has his own voice, a very distinctive voice, which is again something that I appreciate. You can read a poem of his, and you know that it's his, even though he does have a fairly casual style. So I appreciate that. And I also just appreciate variety. Instead of wanting everything to be the exact way that I think is the best way, it's just great to have variety. So all in all, he's not my top favorite, but he's pleasant to read a lot of the time. He has some gems in there. And again, if you don't want anything complex, like maybe if you're kind of looking for somewhere to start, like something digestible in the poetry world, Billy Collins is very, very easy, which can be a really nice thing about him. He's really easy while not being like cheap and low level. So, yeah, those are some thoughts on Billy Collins. Yeah, let me know if you have favorite anthologies of his or any of your favorite poets, and I will see you soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.